Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the next installment of the NTC podcast. This is episode 60. Aaron here, along with Colin. Special guest, Yossi Gozland. He does some work over at HoopsHype. He's a salary cap specialist, so he ties right into what we like to do over at NTC. He's actually just been covering the status of team salaries, their overall situations post-trade deadline, which is what me and Colin were just talking about if you were able to watch our last episode of the podcast. So we're going to bounce off of that, and we're going to flow right into the rest of the season, free agency, and we're also going to touch on the buyout market. As you guys have seen, there are some big-time names in the NBA that have either just hit the buyout market or just been signed to a team or committed to a certain team. We'll touch on that here in just a few minutes. But Yossi, I want to first introduce you, man, and just thank you for taking the time to join us on the podcast. We love the work you've done. Like I said, it ties right into what we're doing, so it's a natural partnership. And hope you've been enjoying this this trade deadline / buyout market madness. It's been pretty crazy to watch, but in any case, we're glad to have you here, man. Looking forward to a good episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been this trade deadline has been pretty peak. I think I thought last year's was like as good as it will get with Harden for Simmons, and that got blown out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something else that's going to top. It's kind of like the trend in the NBA. Like, no matter how good or great you may find something, it seems like not too far down the line, there's something that can top it, which is why I think this makes this game so entertaining and so much fun. But Colin, how about you, man? Do you have certain or similar sentiments about this trade deadline? I know we just got done talking about it, but now we're into the buyout market, so it's just another layer to add on to everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we were talking about before. It's crazy. It's historic between how many deals were done and then how big those deals were. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see anything like it again. But now it's just great to be able to see. All right, these players, we've all settled on the rosters now, other than the buyout market. Now we get to just enjoy and see how these teams shake out. We'll see, how well they'll perform, and we all have our expectations. We'll see where it goes from here.
We sure will. We don't have to wait very long, because even though the trade deadline is finished, we're into the next phase of where teams are bolstering their rosters leading into the playoffs, and that is the buyout market. Like I said, we'll get to that very soon. But what we want to do first on this episode, guys, is open up with some of the big-time free agents that are going to be either hitting the market or potentially hitting the market here when we get into July. Some of these guys have player options, so it's going to depend on what they choose to do. But for many of these players, it's more than likely they're going to hit the market because they can command more money in the open market than their player option is worth. But to get things started, we might as well touch on what could possibly be the biggest free agent in this year's class. It seems crazy to say this because he's changed teams now, I think 4 or 5 times in his career. But Kyrie Irving is the first guy that comes to mind when it comes to potential free agents. Like me and Colin have discussed here, Yossi, on one of our prior podcasts, the Mavericks made a big commitment, a big risk doing this trade, because Kyrie's an expiring contract. And of course, the odds are probably in their favor that he stays, playing with a guy like Luka and being on a team that can be in contention for several years. But it's still worth it to point out that he is a free agent and he has an expiring contract value of about almost $39 million. So, Yossi, you want to open the floor to you here to start off this episode. What were your initial thoughts on this deal? Did you feel like it was worth it for the Mavericks to take a swing like this? And, what do you think the odds are that Kyrie sticks with this team? He's going to hit free agency either way, but what do you think about his odds of sticking with the Mavericks even after the season's over?
So I hated it for Dallas. I didn't think it was worth the risk. I think we've seen countless times what working with Kyrie long term is like, and they gave up. On the surface, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that was kind of like that was a lot for the Mavericks, and especially giving up Finney Smith, who he's not an all-star or anything, but one of the better two-way defenders. Going to be very hard to replace him. So they're going to have now. They're basically going all in. I was pretty surprised they didn't make any other move ahead of the end of the trade deadline. So they're going to have to do something big to really fill up that 5-man lineup and some depth. They have 2 picks or 3 picks they could trade this summer to make it work. So now I do think that they also put themselves in a position where they're going to have to give him a pretty big contract. Now, I don't necessarily think that he's going to get like a no-brainer max, but Dallas can't lose him. But at the same time, I don't think there's really any other teams out there that's gonna really give him an offer that really puts the Mavs in a bind. So I kind of see him getting around the same what he's making right now, and he could still get that in an extension before the end of the season. But at the same time, they're probably going to have to give up. Most likely, he'll become a free agent. They'll end up giving him more than that. Maybe he does get max dollars. I don't necessarily think he'll get max years, but regardless, he'll probably get a deal that's just long enough with a high enough dollar amount that you can probably assume that he'll have gotten more guaranteed money than if he stayed in Brooklyn. But we'll just, that one will just be a little interesting. I get the feeling he'll get like near max dollars for like 3 years. That'd be my prediction.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, before the deal was made, I constantly thought, I feel like every team now just has to treat Kyrie Irving almost as a rental. Like you just have to think of him on a 1-year deal because you never know what he's going to do next and if he's going to decide to play for you or not. So to not only have this need to have to re-sign him, but again, to give up so much value in exchange for him, it puts so much pressure on you, one, to win with him this year. Do they expect to win it all? Maybe not, but they have to perform. I mean, otherwise now they're in a place where if they underperform, now where are they as far as extending him too, right? So they put so much pressure on themselves, and they put so many eggs in a Kyrie Irving basket for someone who's certainly been very unreliable on essentially every franchise he's been on. I don't know if it was the best move to make, but look, you got to take gambles here and there, right? So
yeah, it's just so much worse knowing that this trade could have been avoided if they just taken care of Brunson earlier.
Yeah, right.
Whether an extension or even before that, not giving him that original 4-year deal that they structured. They had kept Brunson, none of this wouldn't be a thing right now.
Right, exactly. And it seems like they're just trying to scramble to find that next guy to help with Luka, but it's almost like, if you're a little bit more patient and you're willing to give up the assets that they did for Kyrie, maybe someone else would be available who would be more reliable, in the offseason. That's what I would think. But they're making a move and they're taking a gamble on someone who hasn't panned out on any team that he's been on. Look, he won a ring with LeBron, but other than that.
Yeah, players ask out all the time. I'm sure we'll get more that no one's really thinking of in the summer. And then maybe we'll be looking at it, hey, like, would you rather have Kyrie or would you rather have this guy who maybe the Mavs could have gotten because they would have had 4 firsts?
Yeah.
And still Dorian. They would have had a stronger package for
right. Exactly.
Maybe I think they probably would have whoever we see is available this summer. I think there's a good chance Dallas could have gotten them.
Right. That's a great point. But you make another great point too, is, so they're kind of hamstrung to having to re-sign him to make this worth it. But on the other side of that is, what is his market if they, if in free agency, who has the cap space to bring him in, and who would want to make that deal? Like we were just talking about, who else wants to invest long-term and give him close to max money? Would any of these teams, we were just talking about the article that you have up. It's a great article summarizing everyone's expected cap space in the offseason. All those teams with cap space, I don't know if they want to make a move on a guy like him to bring him in when they're all building something. They all have this young core. Do you want to bring Kyrie in and disturb that? I don't know if there's going to be a huge market for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the end, you got to pay. You can't squeeze star players. You just pay them what they're worth, and because then it makes them, like, in the future, if you got to move them, the money being there, you can make something happen. So I think he'll just kind of get a little more than what he's getting now. Just if he's expecting like a 4-year max, I don't think he'll quite get that, or 5-year max. he'll definitely get more than whatever Brooklyn's was gonna offer. That's for
Right.
sure.
And that was his goal, and that's if he gets it, that's what he was looking for. So
No, exactly. And you guys bring up a good point about just like losing Brunson obviously was definitely a huge hit for them. And I agree with the direction you're going and how much of a risk it is. And I think it really it's worth talking about as well when it comes down to the Mavericks' overall situation when it comes to cap space. We have to also include, really two other free agents on this team that are pretty big parts of the rotation. The first being Dwight Powell. He's been under a pretty decently valued contract for about 4 years. So his $11 million is expiring. So they'll have to figure out what to do with him. They're already short at center, so they're going to have to either re-sign him or find somebody else to take his spot. And then also Christian Wood is a big one for them. A really great value contract right now at $14.3 million. But going into free agency, he's going to get obviously way more than that because you're looking at an all-star level, 4 or 5 on the court. That meshes very well with Luka. And before Spencer Dinwiddie moved on, it seemed like they had a good connection as well. So I'm just curious to see what they do about that. And between Kyrie and those other two guys, it's going to bind them. It's going to put them deep into the luxury tax. Obviously, Luka's deal just grows more and more valuable, clocking it at about $40 million for next year. So the Mavericks, they're going to have a lot of money on their books, and if they want to stay in contention, they're going to have to re-sign these guys or find somebody of similar or better talent level, which is easier said than done because they don't have the cap space to go and do that. So curious to see where they go from here. But in any case, it's going to be some serious dollars they have to commit to stay where they are. Yossi, I think it's interesting that you are so negative on this trade. Most people I talk to or I look at on Twitter, I wouldn't say they're overly negative on it. They have some reservations, but I definitely hear where you're coming from. They gave up a lot, and it puts them in a very vulnerable position. It kind of handicaps them, kind of like you said, as far as having to resign them. So I get why they did it, but it could definitely come back to bite them if all the pieces don't really kind of settle right where they need to be.
Yeah, as far as those other two free agents, I could see them both getting extended before the end of the season. Mainly, Dwight Powell, he's an important part of their rotation. He's like their most reliable center. Kid loves him. I would imagine they're going to keep him. They're going to want to keep him, especially since he doesn't cost weight. He's not like super expensive by any means. With Wood, I think I could see them. Like there was a report that they offered him a 2-year extension. I wouldn't be surprised if he ultimately ends up agreeing to that. And for Dallas, it's okay. Maybe Wood isn't really a part of the next great Mavs team because they're really, he's still not really getting the role that you would think he would get. So you can almost say like, yeah, he probably isn't even going to be part of the future. But if you can extend him now to a deal that's within the extended trade rules, and they could keep his trade eligibility through the summer, so not just more salary they can trade out versus having him be a free agent, then you have less tradable salaries for whatever that next deal is.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the main goal for him because, like you said, I don't think he is in their future plans. I'm actually surprised that they don't use him more, especially before they got Kyrie. It always seems like every time he's utilized, he performs. So it's strange that they don't. But I just don't know if he would want to agree to that. Maybe he can get more money from them before hitting the free agent market. But if I was Christian Wood, I would rather wait and see what I can get out there on my own, and then I can pick my own team rather than have you deal me.
Like if he does the a 2-year deal, 5% raises, so it's like 2 for 30, or maybe he just wants to do 1 for 15, something like that. That so for him? It's do you want to take that money knowing that you could still be on the Mavs next year and be marginalized, or do you think there's enough money? Is there going to be an offer out there from a cap space team of that or more? Because otherwise, he's looking at the mid-level, which I think is like 11 mil.
True. Right.
So So I don't know how big of a market there is. I don't like we talked about with Kyrie. I don't know which of these cap space teams are gonna have like a big need for wood that they're gonna invest like 15 mil or so.
Up to 20. Yeah, closer to 20. That's a good point too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would
I would probably wait until you got to free agency. But yeah, like you guys are mentioning, his market might not be that that strong, so it might pull his value a little bit farther down. But I can still see him getting a decent amount more than the 14 mil he's at right now. I would say maybe 18 to 20 would be in a fair range. But yeah, that was the only thing I thought about him extending is, it's definitely a risk averse move, but it takes away a little bit from the potential of this next contract. So we'll see. But yeah, I can definitely see him also signing for less years because, as you guys said, I mean, it makes no sense to why his usage was so low. He was putting up huge numbers before he got hurt, which is very impressive. But he's come back, and especially with Kyrie, I just feel like his role is going to be even further reduced. So he might not feel like it's worth it to stay in Dallas just because it limits his ceiling a little bit as far as his production, the minutes, and his overall role. Because a lot of times he doesn't even finish games in the fourth quarter, which is very interesting and disappointing, to be frank.
Right. So we'll see. I would keep an eye on that extension. I feel like that's definitely still something that could happen, even if it doesn't seem very likely at this point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So while we're on the topic of big man, there's another guy out here that can find himself with a decent market. It remains to be seen, but Porzingis is another name that comes to mind. You look at his current deal; it's a player option for about $31 million. This is a very interesting case because, as we know, Porzingis has been very injury prone during his career. He's had several stints where he misses a good chunk of games. Recently, it's been more of the nagging injury types where he misses a handful here, a handful there. But he's still a very strong player, a very important player for Washington. And I wonder if, because of the nature of the way his body functions, he's at a higher risk because he's 7'3", and with the foot and knee injuries, if they flare up, they can really be a trouble spot for his career. So, $31 million is a lot to turn down, I think, for him. I don't know if the market is going to be there for him to acquire another contract like that in the max contract category, just because of the risk that he carries. And I don't think he's at a level of like a Kyrie to where he's worth the risk because he's such he's an all-star, all-NBA type player. So it might be worth it for him to opt in and then see where he's at a year from now. What do you guys think about his odds of opting in? Just because of his injury risk, I think it's a little more likely than the other guys in this list that he would opt in and give it another year. He'll still only be about 29 when that deal expires. So it might be worth him to just opt in and kind of see where the market is at in 2024 as opposed to risking it this year.
So I think he's a big candidate to decline it and sign a new deal. He's having one of his best, if not his best season since that All-Star Knicks season. He has his most durable season too, and I would think it would make sense for him to opt out now if there is a new deal he can secure now. Maybe he takes a little less annual salary, kind of like Andrew Wiggins just did with the Warriors, something like maybe 4 for 110, 120, something like that. He secures that. If something like that's out, I think that would be the best move. Yeah, he gives up a little money on the as far as next year goes, but there's no guarantee that he's going to have this type of season again next year. So that's something I would definitely keep an eye on, assuming he finishes the year strong. And the Wizards, assuming that nothing blows up on the Wizards, that everything is just as they were planning. They want to keep this team together. Beal doesn't ask out. Kuzma's gonna get his new deal too. If their goal is to keep this team together, and if it follows through, then I would expect that this is the kind of thing Porzingis would probably get at this point.
Yeah, I would agree because I think it's the opposite reason with the injury prone. I think that's because he's injury prone. He wants to opt out and get that longer term deal before something would happen again. And like Yossi said, as far as his value, I don't think he's say he opts into into this deal and he gets paid the $36 million. I don't really think there's much of a scenario where he's going to outperform what he's doing now, where he's going to increase his value for that next long-term deal. And again, he's only going to be another year older as well, right? So he's right into that edge of his prime right now. So you want to get that last one longer term big deal that you can get done and maximize that profitability, even though your AAV might be down just a little bit. You want to lock in and get that financial security over the next 4 years, hopefully, like Yossi was saying.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's two ways to think about it. I mean, if he's fully healthy and he's playing at this level the rest of the way, it definitely makes sense for him to go ahead and get those years, get at least 3 to 4, for, like you guys said, a slightly lower value. If there was a situation to where something did happen between now and the end of the season, maybe, he would go ahead and maybe try to get another year, what's left. But yeah, I mean, it would make a lot of sense for him to, try to get a few more years. I mean, it would take him through the rest of his prime what he has left if he gets a 4-year deal or something in that range. And just knowing Washington, the way they operate, they do like to kind of keep their team together. I mean, the past 5 to 10 years, ever since they drafted Beal, I don't think they've ever gone in a direction where they completely tear down and start over. It's just not in their DNA. Beal is still on this team. They still have very strong players. If Porzingis comes back, if Abdia is there and he's playing at a high level, they invest in him now that Hachimura is out. They can find themselves back in, I wouldn't necessarily say playoff territory, but they've always been a team that kind of just goes along with status quo. As long as they have Beal, they have a chance. And it might not mean any more than a low play-in seed, but it seems to be enough for Washington and what they're doing. That transitions us into another player. That's Kyle Kuzma. I mean, 13 million player option. That's 100% getting declined. He's going to free agency. He's played at a very high level this season. He's presented himself as a high-level scorer, a decent defender that can cross between a couple of front court positions and just run plays a little bit here and just be a good ball handling 3 or 4 for that team. So he's definitely going to be back on a new deal. Where that remains to be seen. He's going to have a lot of options. I think he's going to have a lot of suitors. Obviously, Washington would be his number one choice if he wants the most money. He can give him the most years, the most money. But I think of all the players we're discussing, he's probably the least likely to opt into that player option just because of how low it is. Because he signed it, I think it's been about 4 years now when he signed it. He's improved his game so much in that span. But if he does, wherever he signs next, it's definitely going to be a nice increase over that contract. 20 million is definitely in the realm of possibility, being a high-level starter like that. And especially with the market of the current NBA, the state of the current NBA, I think that's a very fair assumption when it comes to what he's going to do next, assuming just taking into his consideration the level of play and the current contract that is expiring going into his late 20s. It's the perfect time for him to capitalize on a new deal.
Yeah, he's going to get one of the bigger pay raises this offseason for sure. 20 is like a very safe floor. I get the feeling he might get closer to like 27 to 30 mil with the Wizards. And that's just the position the Wizards are putting themselves in where they have this tight luxury tax crunch every single year. They're going to have another one this year where they already have a lot of money dedicated and they have, I don't know, I think like 50 mil or so to re-sign, or 60 mil to re-sign Porzingis and Kuzma while staying under the tax, something like that, and get to 14 players. So after trading Rui, I do feel like that gives Kuzma a lot more leverage and what he's going to ask for. So, but regardless, I think they'll give him a new deal. I doubt maybe people will overreact to whatever that figure is if it's more than double what he's currently making. But for a two-way wing, I'd rather overpay than let the guy go. So I'm pretty bullish on what he's going to end up getting. And then, I feel like with the Wizards, Blazers are another team. The way they're going about building these teams, they have these legacy all-stars with them, and they want to keep them, build around them, but they're doing this middle build where they're trying to keep the guys, the importing guys, but also not spend too much. And I do feel eventually it's kind of like a bubble. It might just like pop with these guys eventually asking out if they ever realize, well, we can't really go anywhere with this strategy. And then if you got Porzingis and Kuzma on new long-term deals, the Wizards would be pretty well situated for a potential fire sale, like next trade deadline or something, if they Beal, for example, just finally asked out. So I definitely, if you're the Wizards, you got to keep those guys, try to get them on good deals, because you never know when it might end as far as like trying to contend or make the playoffs with this core.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as Kuzma's market is concerned, I think that you hit the nail on the head as far as what he's probably going to end up getting. And I don't think it's how much he's going to get is the complaint. It's that, again, like you were just talking about, you're kind of locked in with the same team that's just kind of a middling team. So, I mean, if you come back with the same roster as last year, you locked in those guys long term. It's like, well, what do you do now? There's really nowhere to go. I mean, unless you think that these guys who are already hitting their max potential are somehow going to get better. You just don't see a way to improve. But yeah, you have to make that signing, and then hopefully he's playing up to market, and you can and it's a tradable salary at that point.
Now, like the Wizards, like their strategy could have worked if they really nailed one of their draft picks in the past like 5 drafts.
Right.
Like, they didn't like. It's not that it's not like they drafted nobodies, but they didn't get one guy that's like you can really tell he's going to be a high-end starter that would complement Porzingis and Kuzma. Like they didn't get one of those guys, and if they at least did that, okay, maybe we could be looking at the Wizards a little more optimistically. So So I think like 4 years ago when they changed the front office, that's probably what they were thinking. Just hasn't worked out that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
No. You look at Johnny Davis. I mean, he's a prime example, and they always draft in the same range every year. It's somewhere between 7 to 10, 11, and it's tough to get a real difference maker in that range. But even still, they haven't been able to, like you guys mentioned, just get a real impact player. So every time they go through the draft, they just kind of miss. And it robs you of opportunities to get that homegrown talent that you can invest in and have the opportunity to bring on to just see them grow and develop. If you look at these guys on the roster, Beal, Porzingis, Barton, who has been bought out now or will be bought out, Kuzma, like all these guys they are who they are. They're all in their mid to late 20s, and there's really no opportunity for development. Avdia is really the only guy on this roster I can see really kind of getting any better than this. And even he doesn't have the highest ceiling, in my opinion. So, yeah, it's just unfortunate. And, look at their luxury tax space, $1.3 million. It's not a cheap team. It's just going to get more expensive next year with the extensions, with the new deals. And I don't see them being any better than this year. So it's just unfortunate. And really the only way out of this is to trade these guys, which would be a little bit easier with new long-term contracts. But still, it speaks to their situation and just kind of how almost depressing it is. Like, where do you go from here? I guess that's the question.
I feel like the Blazers are kind of like the Western Conference version of this.
Exactly.
We were just talking about them on the last pod, and it's like, man, you just feel for Dame so much. Like he's so loyal to that franchise, and it seems like they're trying to make these moves to get them better, but none of those moves that they've made just seem to stick like that can get them to that next level. And again, it's like they can't hit on the draft picks either. And that's the only other way that you can do it.
Well, they just haven't had like high draft picks recently. Like at least they drafted Simons, I don't know, 20th or something. Okay, that's a big hit.
Yeah, right.
Like Nazir Little for like late 20s, that's solid. We'll see what happens. Like the early returns on Sharp's looking pretty good. I think a lot of people are high on him. So yeah, we'll see. But just as far as like the veterans go, like they're paying all these guys, and it's just like the same treadmill where they just traded. In my eyes, they got worse. Maybe not too worse, but like trading Payton got a little worse as far as this season goes. Mainly so they can open up that flexibility, so they could keep Jeremy Grant. So they're like getting worse, so they could keep the retain the other important aspects of their core.
Mm.
And then unless you're willing to spend more, you're not really getting better. You're just trying to stay where you are.
Right.
And hopefully just get enough internal development that you have something.
Right.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, and we're on a theme right now of teams that just kind of seem to be in the same place. They're not really making any progress from year to year, and I think the Toronto Raptors fit that mold as well. I think we all thought that they were going to be sellers at the deadline rather than buyers because, like, where are they going? You look at their place in the standings, like they're probably going to be in play-in team, so there wasn't a really big runway for them to break into the playoffs and make a lot of noise. Their core of Siakam, Van Fleet, Gary Trent, OG, Boucher, Scotty Precious. I mean, they've been together for several years now, and it doesn't look like their situation is getting any better. And this team has two very key free agents coming up here. Both have player options. Van Fleet at a $22.8 million player option, and then Gary Trent Jr. at a $18.7. So both of them are prime candidates to decline those and go into free agency. Fred Van Fleet in particular, because you look at his past few years, he's been one of the most solid, steady, all-around point guards in the league, a great two-way guy, a great leader. You can always depend on him to do whatever is asked of him. I think me and Colin discussed this on the last podcast. The fact that Van Vliet and Pirtle already have such a great connection as far as the pick and roll goes and just knowing where each other is going to be on the court, it's a great sign. So it just speaks to what Van Vliet can do as far as playmaking, just scoring, just doing whatever needs to be done, guarding opposing guards. He can do it all. So I think he's due for a nice little raise. Even though he's a guy that is entering his late 20s, he's still got a lot of game left and a lot of potential. So as far as Van Vliet and Gary Trent, I don't know if it's worth it to. It depends on what they want to do. If they want to be the Wizards, if they want to be the Blazers, sure, go ahead and offer them new contracts if they come back. But if you do that, you might be locking yourself into just more years of kind of the same thing. I'm just kind of sensing the same trend here as the other two teams who discussed. Do you guys feel the same way about that?
Definitely not. I get what you're saying, but I definitely wouldn't compare. They're definitely in a way better situation. It feels to me like when they went ahead and traded Pirtle, Masai was saying, "Oh, you think my team sucks? You think like I should blow it up? I'll show you guys." And get Pirtle. So it feels like they probably never really had any real intention of getting worse and selling off. And now they put themselves in a position where they can't really pivot next year if things continue to get worse because they traded a 24 first to the Spurs. I just pulled up the protections, top 6 protected through 2026. So you can he's really betting that not only are they gonna like this is gonna work, but they'll be good enough that they're not gonna be that like selling off is not even going to be an option. To me, it seems like, it's going to be a little interesting to see how they navigate this because, so Fred's going to get a raise. I'm guessing he'll get something in the, low 30 million range. Trent, maybe gets like a little raise, not too much more than what he's making. And then you got to bring back, and then you're obviously going to re-sign Pirtle. Like with Dallas and Kyrie, I think they gave up like a good amount for Pirtle, gave him a good amount of leverage that he's probably going to get a deal. I don't think he'll get like 20 million, but maybe a year, but maybe close to that. Maybe he will get 20 million a year. I don't know. We'll see. So they're going to have an expensive roster next year, assuming they bring back all these guys. And I don't think the team's going to be quite good enough to be worth paying the tax. Again, maybe I would have to guess that they're going to be better next year. I don't know. I do think there's going to be some change of some sort. But clearly, like a fire sale where they get multiple, like that's not at all in the cards. Maybe they trade OG, someone like that, for a different piece that can. Not necessarily fit better. I think OG fits really well what they want to do, but just some small type of maneuvering where that can help them get a little more shooting maybe, and then at the same time maybe help them stay below the tax. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate all of these, because I could bring in Pirtle, and you bring back everybody, brings a lot more questions as far as what the roster may end up looking like at the end of all this.
Yeah, I definitely think that they are in a better position than the other teams that we were talking about. And I think what they're doing with the Pirtle trade as well is creating more options for themselves, where, these guys who have these player options that, they're going to end up having to get extended, they can extend these guys, and then next trade deadline, or maybe in a sign and trade, they can start unloading these guys. But like you said, I don't think that they're trying to do it for picks and completely, start over. I think they're doing it to find other pieces to bring on. And they're probably going to look to unload those contracts around Scotty Barnes when they're going to have to sign him again, right? And they're probably kind of aligning this all around that time frame.
Yes.
Where they can afford to have these contracts, maybe unload them for some pieces that are also reasonable contracts, and then they're going to have to set up to sign Scotty Barnes.
So you hit the nail on the head as far as their time frame, because last month I wrote about the Raptors and just about like what a rebuild can look like. One of the things I said is everyone really expected that they're going to do something as far as selling this year, and they still have time before all these guys it really starts to get taxing, like paying all these guys. Mm-hmm. They could still bring back Trent, Van Vliet, Pirtle. They'll be fine as far as next year. After that, that's when there's definitely going to have to be some type of movement, because Siakam's going to be due for a new contract. He could still get All NBA, which would qualify him for Supermax. I think that's definitely still in play for him. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be interesting. Like, how much more do you want to pay Siakam? And then OG, he can opt out. He's probably going to double,
right,
more or less double his annual salary range. Oh, yeah. So you really, and then Barnes his new contract will be the year after that. But like, are the Raptors really going to go into the 24-25 season paying Siakam $40 million plus, Fred and OG $30 million plus, Trent and Pirtle $20 million plus? It seems unlikely to me. Seems right. like they would really need to have like go to the conference finals basically by next year to justify all that. Right. If they are going to pay all that, I would imagine they're going to like turn some of these guys into a better to like a top 20 player if possible.
And that's what I think that the major piece here is, they're just under the luxury tax now. And then in the offseason, if they extend these guys, they might be set up for the tax. But again, the tax doesn't you don't mark the tax until the end of the regular season, right? So they can kind of gauge themselves next season, see if they are legit title contenders with all these guys. If they're still in the same spot, then they can start unloading these players and getting back underneath the tax, getting set up for, Scotty and Siakam, like we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think Scotty changes the equation for this team, and that's what makes this squad different from the other ones we discussed. Is they have a guy that's in his second year that's he's been a rookie of the year. So you look at his potential. They have a couple of guys that they can still really invest in for the future. They're not just locked into an entire roster of guys that have already peaked and are on the downslope. So yeah, the next couple of years for the Raptors are going to be interesting because they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of potential. They have some holes in their roster they need to fix. But with guys like OG that they can move, guys like Boucher, Gary Trent, if they re-sign him, there are avenues to address that. And I think if they play their cards right, they can be set up to be right back in the kind of thick of the playoff race and maybe even contention. And the great thing about this team, I was just looking at their picks last night, their draft capital, when I was updating that trade, is the draft capital for the next couple of years is a little dicey, but you look past that, so you go probably 26 onward. They still have a lot to work with. So that's the other part of this team that's encouraging. So they play their cards right. They have a great front office. They can definitely find their way back into contention. They don't have to make any drastic moves, trade half the team, do anything like that. So there's still a lot of potential here for for the makeup of this team.
Yeah, and Yossi, I talked about this on the last pod. Were you surprised that there wasn't more of a demand on the market for Pirtle on the trade market? Like I thought there would be more teams that were in contention that would be asking for him, but maybe I thought that maybe the reason why is there just aren't enough first round picks to go around and matching salaries that just couldn't get there. But
I think I wasn't that surprised. Like the
Yeah.
only other team I was really thinking about as a really good Pirtle fit, in my opinion, were the Suns. If like I was when I was kind of projecting what the Suns could do, 'cause I expected them to do something big, not necessarily KD big, but I thought maybe they could also maybe they'd get Fred VanVleet or OG or both.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like, why don't if they're gonna trade some of their depth for some high end talent, which they just did. Something that would make sense to me is if they traded DeAndre Ayton to Spurs for Pirtle, McDermott, Josh Richardson, something like that. And I think that some kind of deconsolidation trade like that is going to be something they could look at in the offseason, especially because they're going to have depth's going to be a little bit challenging for them.
Right.
But like that, just like the Suns, I think Pirtle would have been like a nice, cheaper, low usage option that could really fit what the Suns are doing now. But when you look at the rest of the league, most teams are pretty situated at center. Center's not really not the hardest position to fill by any means. And also Pirtle gonna be due for a pretty big raise.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably also playing into interest around the league or lack thereof. So I guess I was a little surprised there wasn't a little more interest, but I didn't also think that he'd be a guy that like the whole league was gonna
right
really try to go for.
Yeah, that's fair. So the free agent market's very robust, and there are a lot of names we can look at. I think we touched on some of the big ones and how they overall fit with their teams. But as we go through this part of the NBA calendar, I think it's also a good time to look at the buyout market and just kind of look at a few names here. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious, what we need to kind of start with because this one is very relevant, very current. Kevin Love signing with the Heat, guys, I think is a very good move for him and the team. Bobby Marks posted a situation comparing the Sixers and the Heat yesterday where he has this little whiteboard and he writes down, what each team can offer and everything like that. And the Heat obviously had the upper hand. They do still have part of their mid-level exception remaining. So that definitely gave them an edge over the Sixers, who can only offer a very small veteran minimum for Love services. And the Heat also, it looks like on paper, they have a better place for him as far as just easily slotting into the rotation. They have a very obvious need at the 4 and the 5 with their team. With Yurts have been missing the entire season to this point. Bam needs some reinforcements. Dedmon's shipped off now. They set off a second round pick. I was waiting for them to make another move. It didn't make any sense as to why they would ship him off along with a second round pick and not fill the void somehow. So this is what they did. This is the route they're going. I think it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Kevin Love isn't the same player he was in his early days in Cleveland or Minnesota. But what he brings to this team is a lot of great rebounding, a lot of size, a little bit of playmaking for that position, which I think is underrated. Stretch shooting. I mean, if you guys go and look at the Heat's shooting percentage overall in the league, I mean, they're well below league average. I think they're only shooting 33% as a team, which is just dreadful. Bottom 5 in the league. So what he brings to them is a level of stretch shooting at either the 4 or the 5, a pretty accurate shooter. And just last season, he was runner-up to 6th man of the year. So I think he still has a decent amount left in the tank to at least be a 20 to 25 minute per guy for the Heat. Maybe not start, but be a bench guy that gets a lot of minutes and fills a void for them. So I love the signing. I think it makes a lot of sense, not just for the Heat, but for Kevin Love. So he gets the money, he gets the role, and he goes to a team that's very competitive and might not be the Sixers or the Bucks, but still a very solid team that can make noise in the playoffs.
I think the playing time was the biggest thing. I touched on Love's availability after it was reported he would get bought out, and Miami just made the most sense. Like they have a clear need for front court help. They have really not much after Bam. Yurtseven is injured. They just let go of Deadman, and they've got Orlando Robinson. Now they just added Zeller as well. So they just needed to beef up their front court. So yeah, as far as the mid level, yeah, that was also something. We'll see if that played into things. Usually, existing MLEs rarely play into free agent buyout decisions. Mostly like a playing time situation thing. But yeah, that's definitely an advantage that maybe will help them. Do you guys? I have a couple of questions for you guys. One, do you think Love has a chance to start? I would say most likely not, but I do think there's a pretty good possibility that that ends up working out. And two, do you think Cleveland do you think they may have made a mistake ahead of the trade deadline? Perhaps they didn't. Maybe they should have tried to move him earlier to a situation that could have prevented him going to an Eastern team like the Heat for free. I'll give my quick answer to that. That's tough to answer just because it's hard to trade Kevin Love with that big salary. Most teams that would have wanted Love probably would have wanted the Cavs to take back some bad money, which probably is like a non-starter. But yeah, it just seems like also, it's just unfortunate the Cavs had to end up buying him out, and now he's on Miami, who maybe they'll meet in the first round or something.
Yeah. So
Go ahead, Colin.
as far as him starting for the Heat, I could see it happening. I don't think it will, but the thing I think it's such a great fit to have him there. One, because they're so injury prone and they need as much contribution as possible and as much depth as possible. And you're talking about the front court help, as much front court help as possible. And that just to add even more veteran presence on that team. And Spo's going to find a way to use him, and he's gonna be fired up to play on that team. As far as Cleveland trying to unload him, I think you already answered your own question pretty quickly on that. Like I just don't know if they'd be able to frame a deal where they could get it, because like you talked about, first you'd have to be shipping them off, so you're cutting the league in half essentially, or you're trading them to a non-contender. And at that point, if you're trading to a non-contender, you're going to have to give up something else just to dump his salary. And I think it's just the easier move is to buy him out and then, have more faith in your team that it's not going to be a big deal down the line, and pray that it's not, and it doesn't backfire.
Yeah,
Right.
That's actually a really great point, because also if you trade him to a non-contender, he could end up getting a buyout anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Case, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I just think it's worth touching on, because I'm sure a lot of Cavs fans are like, "What the hell? Like, why do we end up buying him out? Like, we could actually still keep using him." But he's got to be bought in. He's a 15-year vet. And it's just hard to find a trade for him where you get something back that doesn't kill your books in the future, and where he'll be not getting a buyout.
Yeah. I'm more surprised, and I want to hear Aaron's take on Kevin Love's contributions too, but I'm also surprised at the lack of Cavs, any kind of moves on the Cavs part on such a busy trade deadline. I thought they would do something to try to bolster the roster in some way, shape, or form, but they stood pat. They were one of the two teams that did.
Yeah, my thoughts on the deal, first of all, when it comes to Love's starting role or not, I think it's possible just because of the current situation. Right now, they've been starting Caleb Martin at the 4. Very undersized. It's not his ideal position at all, especially as a starter. He's just kind of put in a situation. It doesn't really fully take advantage of what he brings to the table. So as far as slotting in Love as like that stretch 4 next to Bam, I think it could work out. And I think I heard it was reported that initially in the beginning of the season, the plan was to play Bam next to Yurtseven in the front court together. So, if you follow the train of thought for Spoelstra, he wanted to start 2 big guys together, Bam with another big guy, maybe to kind of take away some of the wear and tear on him so he doesn't have to constantly be going up against those big guys and wearing him down over a long season. I think it is possible he can end up starting. As far as finishing games, I think that's a different story as far as like if he's going to be out there in the closing lineup, maybe not. They do have a lot of weapons. They can play Jimmy at the 4, which they can work in limited minutes. You slide in Oladipo and Hero and Gabe Vincent. So I wouldn't see him finishing, but I think he can definitely start and play 25 minutes or so. As far as him being traded, I mean, yeah, you guys brought up great points about that. Owed $28 million. You have to find a way to somewhat match that salary. You have to find a way to, find a suitor that's willing to just take on money like that, which, as you guys said, that requires adding in some kind of sweetener. And I think the Cavs are already in a place where they've given up enough draft capital trying to get Donovan Mitchell. So, their first this year is protected. They have their first next year, but then they have no first in 25, 7, or 9. And then those 26 and 28s are pick swaps. So I think they feel like they've already given up enough. They didn't want to have to throw in another batch of seconds or another first to get a team to take on his contract. And then, of course, like you guys said, he might end up being bought out anyway and still find his way to the Heat. So, yeah, I think it just kind of – the only thing I was confused about is why they didn't just ride out the season with him. He's still very valuable, and I think just having another guy like that in the rotation wouldn't hurt. But yeah, that's kind of where I feel it comes down for him. And I think the Heat will use him in a great way. And I think he'll play really well off of Bam because they both have the ability to not only score, but also shoot a little bit. And then they can also find the open teammate and play in the high post. So I think it's going to be a natural pairing, whether or not he comes off the bench. Just don't be surprised if he does start, just because the Heat are kind of somewhat desperate and they can really usually bring some to the table for that team.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance the Cavs and Heat meet in the first round as the 4 and 5 seeds.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I'm not saying that's going to swing that series in Miami's favor, but
you can see it. You can see him hitting a corner 3 to win a game or something.
But if the Heat win and if the Heat win that series and Love's like looking pretty good, there's going to be there could be a lot of backlash over that whole process.
100%. Let's finish this off, guys, with one more buyout candidate that has been rumored to go to Miami. We don't know if it's going to happen or not yet. But Russell Westbrook is in talks with the Clippers. He's still kind of in the air. Westbrook is a very unique situation. He's also been a journeyman over the past few years. He's gone into every team he's gone into the past few years. He starts off great. And it's funny because I keep seeing like this graph of his play on Twitter where he goes to a team and they're like, okay, he's great. And then he kind of, has a little a mid stretch, and then you get to the end part of the season. It's like, wow, this guy is great. And then it always feels like he kind of wears out his welcome and the team is just ready for something else, more shooting for that position, something like that. So I can see, the Clippers making a run at him. I can see the Heat making a run at him. I think the Heat makes sense as well, from a backup guard standpoint, just because they need some kind of a jolt, anything. They're dead last in points per game. They're one of the worst teams as far as offensive efficiency. So I think he can address some of their needs. The shooting is a problem. I wouldn't play him too much next to Bam and Jimmy Butler. But if they can find a way to kind of balance his minutes against those guys, he can lead the second unit, give them an infusion of energy, infusion of transition opportunities, easy baskets. That does nothing but help that team. So I can't really think of too many other teams where he makes sense. I don't know about you guys. I heard the Wizards being floated around, but I don't know if they want to go through that again. But yeah, I would say the Clippers and the Heat make a lot of sense for him because he wants to go to a team where he's going to win, and he wants a sizable role. And I don't know if there's any other teams out there besides those two that offer both of those for Westbrook. But what do you guys think about that?
I do not think I don't really buy that the Clippers are interested in him or that the Heat. I feel like in the end it'll just be either he goes back to Washington, the Wizards. He could be arguably an upgrade over. I think he's definitely an upgrade over Monte Morris. Delon Wright's been really good with his defensive specialty, but I do like the idea of Westbrook pairing, especially with Porzingis. I can't think if he's ever played with a big man quite like Porzingis. and I think that could be really good for Porzingis. Playing alongside him, they had a lot of success that one year. I'm sure the Wizards would love him back. And then there's Chicago, the other team with Billy Donovan. We all know that. I feel like it's between them two. I don't really see any of the other high-end contenders going after him, to be honest.
I have a interesting one. Why not Phoenix? Add to that point guard depth with who knows what's going to happen with Chris Paul. He's always getting hurt, and and it always turns on them in the playoffs. Give him a little insurance.
Kevin Durant would have to sign off on that.
Well, of course. I mean, that's the thing. But if he was on board with it, and Westbrook was okay playing that type of role, that would be the other part. But
yeah, I do agree with you though that the Suns do need to add another guard. I think that's what they really should be prioritizing with that last roster spot. I really like the idea of them getting Beverly, which Chris Paul would have to sign on, but at least if he's on the team, he's not gonna like shove him from behind or anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. It takes away another guy that could, potentially cause him to get into trouble or get hurt or whatever. But I think it's important that, they do get another guard, because look at Cameron Payne. I mean, he's missed a whole ton of games this season, so they're just really, really short. They had to rely on their deep, deep guard room in order to just kind of get through the middle part of the season. So I think they're as desperate as anybody for guard room. Other than probably Miami. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense for them. I would like to see I think if they're interested, Westbrook interested, they should make that happen. Just because they never have too much depth, too much talent like that in the team that's trying to get back into the finals and finally get over the hump with Chris Paul in the full.
My counterpoint to that, though, is that if Chris Paul gets hurt again, they'll probably just start Devin Booker at point guard, and they'll just take some of their other wings, and because we already it looks like the 5-man rotation will, when everyone's healthy, it's going to be Paul, Booker, Craig, Durant, Aiden. Josh Okogie's been playing really well recently. He's hitting threes at an amazing rate now. Arguably making a strong case to be the fit starter over Craig. I think they'll end up going with Craig in the end, but I feel like in the end that if something happens to Paul, they would probably revert to Booker over Westbrook, if we're being realistic.
Yeah, that's true. And you probably don't want someone who is going to possess the ball so much, taking the possessions away from someone like Book and KD. So that makes sense too. That's a good point.
Yeah, I thought about that Westbrook to Phoenix. I wrote about it in Westbrook fits, but then the more I think about it, especially after the odds Durant, the less I see that happening. The other one I think could make some sense is Dallas. They could, but now I'm also kind of tuning out on that just because the way McKinley Wright, Jaden Hardy, they're starting to look good. I don't think they should take away minutes from those guys. Josh Green too, even though he's the DFS replacement right now. So that's the other thing. If you're going to bring in Westbrook, who are you taking away minutes from?
Right.
Yeah,
that would be a fun locker room. Just having fun. Just the press conferences between Kyrie and Westbrook. Oh man, please do that.
That would be hilarious to see. But I like that point about starting Book at point guard because he had a year or two stretch there in those dark days of Phoenix before they got to be where they are now. He was starting at point guard a lot, but they just had nobody of really solid talent level to man that position. So he has a lot of reps at that position. He's comfortable on ball. He's comfortable running pick and rolls. I mean, I think it fits. It fits if they want to go that direction. Then they have people that can slot in. They have more options at the 2 than at the 1. So if they want to do that, that's definitely a viable path for them.
Yeah.
So guys, I mean, we do have some other buyout market candidates here. Wish we can get into that, but unfortunately, it's probably going to be saved for another episode. But thanks to everybody for tuning into this installment. It's been a great time. We've had a lot of fun here with Yossi here on the podcast. So me and Colin would like to thank you, Yossi, for coming on, offering your time. Thanks so much for joining us. Love the work you're doing at HoopsHype. And then just being a part of that salary cap CBA world. We know it's kind of a niche thing, but we really take pride in it and we really enjoy it. So keep up the great work, and we hope to be in touch with you again soon.
And everyone should check out his articles. That he has some good stuff out there as far as the off season, what it's going to look like for everyone in their cap space and the moves that they're going to have to make. Some really good stuff.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on, guys. It's really fun conversation just about not just like necessarily CBA stuff or anything like that, but like the direction of certain teams. I think we got into some really interesting ground as far as like the Wizards, Blazers, Raptors. Not too many spaces I could have good discussion on that kind of stuff.
Well, we're glad that we were able to offer you the open floor to discuss that. It's definitely very interesting. And if you guys are looking for more content like this, be sure to check out our website, notradeclause.com. Cap sheets are updated. Draft Capital is just about there as well. And our podcasts are on that website, in addition to articles that are going up just about every week on these topics and also other ones around the NBA. So be sure to check us out if you're looking for resources like this to kind of keep in touch with the NBA, because it is ever changing and day by day things are in flux, and you don't want to miss out on some of the big stories here around the league. So thank you everybody for tuning into this episode. If you made it this far, we will hope to see you in the next installment. And until then, enjoy this NBA season here. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll catch you next time. Take care.